Great. Bonjour. Bienvenue. Welcome to everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm the Executive Director at the Alliance Française. It's a pleasure for us to welcome Loubna Hassanieh today. As some of you know, she should have been at Alliance Française in March during the Festival de la Francophonie, but COVID-19 causes us to be online today. Loubna is in LA, as well as Jennifer Kuyak, who's going to be in conversation with her. Both of them are in LA, and that's the beauty of Zoom, is that we can connect the East and the West Coast of the United States at least. I want to honor the Ambassador Gabriel Issa, who is here with us today, attending, the Ambassador of Lebanon. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. In a minute, Mr. Hashem will also speak, and I will come back. I just wanted to say a few words about why it's important and why the Alliance Française is so honored to have Loubna coming and talk today. For me, as a person, Lebanon is a country dear to my heart, and those of you who know me here know about that. I was there in 2016 in Beirut for the Salon du Livre Francophone, and I spent, I loved every minute of it. I felt like walking in history when I visited Byblos. It was amazing. I explored Beirut neighborhood, and I have really dear memories of Hamra, Ashrafie, Burj Hamoud, and Badaro, and also the magnificence of the souks that were rebuilt, and all of the secrets that you can find in Beirut's neighborhood. I stood in awe and absolutely bewitched by the new room, which had just been renovated at the National Museum with the sarcophagi. That was amazing. I must have stayed there 30 minutes, totally bewitched by what I saw. And then I visited the Sorsok Museum, and I felt like I was in a fairy tale. It was so beautiful. That was amazing. I was able to reconnect with friends who had been at university with me in France in the 80s. So, and most of them are authors like Loubna, or journalists as well. And I, of course, met a lot of new friends because Lebanon is famous for its friendliness and its hospitality, and that was absolutely amazing. But there is one thing, one dilemma I still must try to find the answer to, because for me that is the question. And basically, it's a very pragmatic question. It is, which knefe is the best when you're having breakfast on La Corniche? Is it Bil Jibne or Bil Ashti? So I still have not been able to answer that question. So that's why every time I have both. Anyway, that being said, I will let Mr. Hashem now please say a few words.
Good evening. Thank you, Sarah. Excellencies and honorable participants. I am honored and happy to address you tonight, and I thank the Ambassador of Lebanon, His Excellency Gabriel Issa, who is participating in this web meeting, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you all for being with us. The Embassy of Lebanon is happy to be part of the DC Francophonie Festival 2020 through the participation of Dr. Loubna Hassanieh, author of Where Will My Heart Beat? We would have really enjoyed the physical signing ceremony if it could happen last March, but here we are this evening doing it under the so-called new normal circumstances. And I would like to thank the Alliance Française for their great efforts in organizing these valuable events, which put a spotlight on our culture and the many things we have in common. The book was brought to our attention by Ambassador Issa, who also recommended it to Condé Nast Traveler as the one to read before visiting Lebanon. The Embassy of Lebanon is proud to have brilliant Lebanese Americans in our community, spread out over 100 cities across the United States, who reflect Lebanon's multicultural image. Lebanon has a rich heritage of many brilliant writers, poets, and artists, from the likes of Gibran Khalil Gibran, Amin Rihani, Mikhail Naimi, some of the most emblematic writers and poets of our immigrants. Since that golden era, the Lebanese community has continued to make us proud with their many contributions and advancements across various fields and sectors. Loubna is one such example, and we are incredibly proud to have her here with us this evening. Not only did Loubna succeed in her domain of study by earning a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology and publishing many academic papers in the field, but she also gave herself the time to develop and share her talent in writing with the public by publishing her first fiction novel, Where Will My Heart Beat? I would also like to highlight that Loubna is a generous philanthropist who has been quite active in the community, providing assistance to students and families who have faced setbacks and challenges due to the coronavirus pandemic throughout the United States. I had very positive impressions of Loubna as I read her book long before our first meeting at the embassy. Her book is not a simple fiction, and I believe it has some roots in reality. The events of the book span across the period of the Industrial Revolution, taking the reader through the peaceful living of a tranquil village as it witnesses socio-economic change and describes the interaction of the characters as they experience passion, hate, animosity, and disappointment. Loubna's words allow the reader to reflect on the eternal struggle between good and evil in a context where compassion and love face exploitation, greed, and indifference. It also tackles how values and societal changes resulting from evolution and urban expansionism might affect human beings and retrace their destiny. Without further ado, I thank you again. And I think we're all looking forward to listen and hear from Loubna and the other guests. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hashem. I will now read a few words about Loubna and Jennifer. So as Mr. Hashem already said, Loubna is very qualified in science, but she was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon, during the grueling wars of the years of the civil wars and invasions. She moved to the United States, where she earned the Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA, and a PhD in Biochemistry and Molecular Biology from USC, University of Southern California. She worked as a cancer research scientist and has several publications on the inhibition of tumor growth and metastasis. A few years ago, she published a debut novel, Where Will My Heart Beat?, to spark the conversation about the mystery of human existence. And she resides in Los Angeles with her husband and 2 children. Dr. Kuyak is one of 8 children. She grew up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and Yankton, South Dakota. She spent most of her childhood raising her 5 younger siblings as her parents were distracted by work. Jennifer received a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology and Chemistry from the University of Wisconsin, La Crosse, and received a Master of Science in Epidemiology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She worked as a researcher and epidemiologist for several years before entering medical school at Oregon Health and Sciences University. She completed a residency in diagnostic radiology at Baylor University Medical Center in Dallas, Texas, and went on to complete a musculoskeletal fellowship at the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona. She has been working in the private sector as a diagnostic radiologist for the past 10 years and was the primary radiologist for the Los Angeles Rams for several years. She is both humbled and honored to participate in this event. Well, let me say that we are humbled because of both of your, resume, which are really, really impressive. And it's great to see 2 scientific women. You know, we haven't many of those speaking at the Alliance Française, and so that we are very, very thrilled to have that. So without further ado, I'm gonna let Loubna and Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. Honorable guests, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Loubna Hassanieh, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here tonight. All of you make this event possible. So thank you for joining me. Mr. Hashem, thank you so much for your heartfelt introduction. When I first met you in DC a couple of months ago, you were so eager to discuss my book with me. I remember you sat on the edge of your chair, and it wasn't so much that you had a list of questions for me. You had assertions of what the book is all about and the impact it left on you. I couldn't be happier hearing what you had to tell me and what you just said today. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. I would like also to thank you, Natasha and Sarah and everyone at the French Alliance for your professionalism and for not giving up on this event. Also, many thanks to everyone at the Lebanese Embassy and all those who worked so diligently to bring us together from Lebanon to California, from France to DC, and deep into the Pacific to French Polynesia, bringing the vastness of the whole world right here to us tonight. My friend, Dr. Jennifer Kuyak, thank you for doing me the honor of moderating the discussion tonight. Thank you, Jen.
So we're going to start out the discussion with kind of talking about, why you started where you were with your book. So before you published your book, Where Will Your Heart Beat, you spent years working as a research scientist, conducting cancer research in a lab, writing scientific literature and reviews. So what prompted you to switch from linear thinking of science to holistic thinking?
The two thinking processes, Jen, that you just mentioned are very different. They allow us to look at the world differently. So the difference in their purpose, however, is not that big. It's very slim. They both help us extract information from the world around us. While one helps us understand the whole world and who we are through numbers and facts and discursive reasoning, which is the linear reasoning you just mentioned, the other one helps us visualize the world and see the world through our imagination and our intuition. Linear thinking it moves us in a straight line. That's why it's called linear. It takes us from point A to point B, whereas holistic thinking, on the other hand, engages us, engages our imagination. And with our imagination, I believe we can tap into anything. The universe is our limit at that point. Now, the way science works is that it looks strictly at natural phenomena and harvests information from it, physical data that is detectable through our five senses, or an enhanced form of them. Think of the microscope, for example, and uses this data in a linear point for point, involving logic, point for point way to extract information about who we are and the world around us. And I am absolutely fine with all that. That's actually what allowed science to get us to where we are now with 500 years of work and hard work. But my concern is the contention that only physical data and linear thinking constitute the legitimate ground for an all-inclusive, all-comprehensive understanding of who we are. I personally believe there is a universal knowledge to humanity that does not emanate from logic and linear reasoning, but is rather holistic and emanates from the heart, from our intuition. We have been so smart in the lab. We have done so much work and we become so developed and well-informed in the lab. But what we lack is to be smart and wise and intelligent outside the lab in our day-to-day lives. For instance, how can linear thinking explain my yearning for God? It cannot. My hunger for love, my curiosity, my imagination. Through the narrative of the book, I present several situations that compel the reader to tap into their spiritual core. In my life, and I'm sure in the lives of many, transformative events have presented themselves. And I use some of these events in my book and raise several related questions. But I don't claim to have answers because it's all about the individual experience, the personal experience. What I see is not exactly what you see. And the speed at which I get it is not the same that you have. So with Where Will My Heart Beat? The attempt is to prime the reader for their own personal discovery in an effort to restore balance between the two worlds, the physical and the spiritual, the linear and the holistic, because these two are definitely connected and neither one of them, Jen, can stand on its own. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So when did you start writing Where Will Your Heart Beat, and how long did it take you to write it?
The whole project started in 2013.
Okay.
I am a mother of two, Jason, who's 25, and Grace, who's 18. And fall 2013 was when my son was shipped away to college, UCSB. So naturally, I had more time on my hands. Now, I had been mulling over the idea of writing a book, a novel, for quite some time, because back in middle school, I remember writing short stories and poetry. But because I spent so many years going to school, and you know how that is, Jen, raising a family and working as a research scientist, so naturally, it was very hard to find the time to write. And to answer the other side, the other part of the question, Where Will My Heart Beat took me 5 years, from the minute I started to the minute I submitted to the publisher.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I completely agree with you with how it can be hard to have the time to do it.
Yeah.
So without giving the book away,
yeah.
In case some of the people in the audience haven't read it yet, can you tell us what the story is all about?
Yeah. In broad terms, I can say it is a journey of self-discovery. You have this young man, Adele Jacob, who is born to a prominent family. His father is the mayor of the town, which is called Crescent, and a very successful businessman. Now, Adele likes people, okay? All the kids of Crescent want to be friends with him. He is kind, he is ethical, he plays well with others, and everybody wants to come to his house to play. His brother Aslan, on the other side, the village kids fear him. He is cruel, he is impolite, and he is jealous of his brother. When Adele was 17, Aslan pushed him down a flight of stairs, and Adele became crippled for the rest of his life. Now, Adele felt betrayed, not only by his brother, but also by his parents, who always turned a blind eye to Aslan's behavior. Adele realized that the only way to save his life is to leave Crescent. But sadly, that meant also leaving behind his first love, Mona. Now, years and years later, he comes back to Crescent, driven by this deep yearning for his hometown. But he has to face an unresolved past and soon learns shocking truths about his parents and who he is. Most importantly, he learns what happened to Mona in his absence. Now, coincidentally, he meets this young lady. Her name is Serene, who's a physical therapist and whose life is plagued by anxieties and recurring dreams. And each feels a strong connection to the other without knowing why and being able to explain it. Through the days, Adele gradually realizes that her dreams are mysteriously connecting him to his past, and particularly awakening his memory about Mona, and setting him on a path to reconnect with her. Now, what will happen to him on his journey? Will he find Mona? Will he make peace with his brother and his past? Or will he continue alone? One would have to read the book to find out, but the narrative keeps unfolding until the end, and the reader will be drawn in until the end. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, I agree with that. I had to read it twice. I couldn't wait till the end the first time. What fundamental ideas did you explore in your work?
Yeah, the themes, these are the themes. Okay, so there are so much to the narrative. the fundamental idea that I explored is love, the transcendent of all bounds. At a first glance, you can easily say it's a love story. Mm-hmm. But taking a second glance, you discover that it's a story about love and the power of emotion and the power of intention. Love, that form of energy that is beyond any limits, beyond any definition, that needs no introduction. In Where Will My Heart Beat, it is the force that brings two people together in a very mysterious way. Now, the story is also about the importance of hope in one's life and how hope saves the lives of many and how in its absence, the lives of many are taken. Hope gives us the courage to continue. It gives Adele the courage to continue on his path and not give up. And he ends up finding hope. The story also raises issues about inequality and the effects of inequality on the fabric of a society, about the destructive powers of corruption and greed, about family dysfunction. Last but not least, the story sheds light on how the human race struggles with sickness and death. This may seem morbid, but we all know that death is a lurking threat and that we often dismiss, we don't want to talk about, but only when we talk about it and more openly can we become less scared and less fearful of it. So now we might differ ever so passionately on details pertaining to death and what happens to us after we die. For example, am I only physical? So once I'm gone and buried, am I all gone? Mind and body? Or do I transform into some sort of energy? And if so, what is that energy? Can it be harvested all over again? Now, I want to remind everybody, it was Albert Einstein who said E equals mc squared, right? Energy turns into matter and matter turns into energy. Mm-hmm. So one more point I'd like to add before I give it back to you, Jen. Although we all differ in thoughts about the subject of death, we shouldn't overlook the fact that we all remain ignorant, equally ignorant when it comes to death and the possibility of any form of life or existence after death. Thank you, Jen.
Such wise words. Thank you. I appreciate that. So tell us a little bit about the setting. What made it so unique or important, and could the story have taken place anywhere?
Where Will My Heart Be is set in a village called Crescent. Mm-hmm. And although nowhere in the book, Crescent was said to be set in Lebanon, the description of Crescent infallibly made readers infer the connection. Mm-hmm. The way I described Crescent turns it into an archetypical Lebanese village that is based on early values of the society I grew up in. Simple living, where people shared with each other and loved each other and were more in tune with nature. I expressed my personal love for that setting when, through Adele, who's the narrator and the protagonist, when he said, although humble in nature and to some even prosaic, Crescent was the cradle of my dreams, the fount of my imagination, and the joy of my life. So the heart of the story is in this old-fashioned farming community. The timing of it is around the Industrial Revolution. That allowed me to shed light on the historical relationship between man and earth, and the earth, in an effort to revive our love for the environment and the importance of its sustainability. It also allows me light on the considerable impact the Industrial Revolution has over villages like Crescent and the societies they represent. On a more technical note, I used it as a parallelism between the transformational growth that Adele went through and the undergoing transformation of the land. To answer the second part of your question, I don't think the plot would have changed had I chosen a different setting. The story can happen anywhere. My themes are pretty universal. Yeah. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah. I had the same thoughts too, where I kind of thought about different places that it could occur. So you remarkably conjured a complex tale filled with unpredictable twists and turns. How did you develop your plot and characters?
Well, I started with the conflicts in mind. I knew what conflicts I wanted to tackle. And there were two major ones. The first one is an inner conflict. It's the character versus self conflict. It's about the unrelenting human quest for the truth and for redemption. So Adele, the protagonist, asks at one point, I'm quoting from the book, he says, "Who am I?" And then he goes on to say, "I am mind, I am soul. I am all past. I am all future. I am an expression. I am a word." And that has a lot of meanings embedded in it, a lot of meaning. At the highest level, he is this immutable, indestructible, fundamental aspect of his existence, the mind and the soul, limitless, universal. And then he goes to, I am all past, I am all future. You can look at this both metaphysically and scientifically, actually. I am all past. I carry the DNA of my ancestry in me, and I will be passing them down to my children and the next generations. And if you look at it metaphysically, if I am that universal mind or universal soul, I am timeless. I have no boundaries in time. And then he says, I am an expression. People see you the way you present yourself, your persona. The way you're looking at me right now is the way you see me. That's me. That's how I'm expressing myself. But deep inside, what reflects on the outside is my word. Words become me. Words become thoughts, and thoughts become me. And I live through the words I say. So it's very good and very helpful to have nice and gentle words when we speak to each other. So that's how he reflects on himself. And then later in the book, he asks, were decisions ever my own? And with that, for example, he's raising the question of free will. Is it a question? It's a question upon which our lives and our society rest. Are things determined for us, or are we free-willed? Are we responsible for our choices, or are we doing what we are predetermined to do? So that's the conflict between the character and self. I gave you two examples there. And then there's also the conflict to find redemption, the quest to find redemption. He says, for example, all my life, I was conscious of my brother's destructive tendencies. I became obsessed with the urge to undo his harm. The second conflict I tackled was a character versus character conflict. And in this one, I used juxtaposition as a literary device to bring into clear view each of the characters and be able to develop them well. You have the good brother, we just mentioned, Adele, and you have the bad brother, Aslan. One is noble, ethical, respectful, loving, who goes after what is right in life. And the other one is destructive, a bully, deceitful, vulgar, and he goes after what is possible in life. He knows no limits and he pushes all limits. while one is at peace with himself and in alignment with his own purpose, the other one is not. So once the conflicts were established and I realized what I wanted to tackle and the ideas and the fundamental themes behind them, I twisted and turned the plot around them, and I used a double narrative. You have two narratives that end up merging, and in the process of merging these two narratives, multiple layers of personalities emerge, multiple perspectives about same situations, or the same situations, certain situations are also presented to the reader. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks. So can you take us deeper into the life of Adel Jacob, and how difficult was it to portray a life of a man for you? And why did you pick him to be the voice of the book? And how did you make him to be so credible and believable?
Yeah. Well, Adel Jacob is the protagonist. And at the same time, he's the narrator of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Telling you the story of his life.
Mm-hmm.
He is a male protagonist, yes. But that did not bother me. With all the male family members and friends I have in my life, I think I had a big enough sample to use for my study. So his character made sense to the underlying message, and I just went for it. What I sought to do is to compare and contrast two people, two brothers, who should in theory be very similar in character, but they're not, right? Because that's not how life works.
Yeah.
Even with two identical twins living under the same conditions, raised by the same parents, right? Yeah. Emerge different characters, different physical predispositions, also, right? Yeah. So I set these two people on equal grounds as a control in my study. They're brothers, born 1 year apart, to the same parents, raised in the same environment, and under the same environmental stresses. The reason why they're brothers, not sisters, you may ask, is because it allows me to add an additional dimension to the story that I wanted to shed light on, and that's the male dominance in a society. Now, the novel consists of 5 parts and 1 epilogue at the end of the book. The book is structured so that the first part is said or presented to the reader in the 3rd person, and it verges slightly towards a descriptive style. It's, if you will, an introduction to the characters and the plot, and sets you on the platform, where you particularly learn about Serene and the physical therapist I mentioned earlier, and who she really is, and what her job is in that little town, and what her dilemma is. And then starting the 2nd part, and until the end of the book, the novel switches to the 1st person. And that's when you start hearing the voice of Adel Jacob, and you learn who he is. Now, 4 times in the book, and as Adel shares with you the story of his life, he draws you into his current state of mind as he writes his reflections. He has 4 chapters in the book called Reflections. They come at a time when his personal experience in life is very ripe. His voice in them is very compelling. You can't but believe him. He has years of experience deposited in his character, and his voice is wise and captivating. In one of his reflections, for example, he says, "We are indeed limited when the answers lie within us, but we don't know how to retrieve them. We are blind when beauty lies around us, but we choose instead to chase it. We are hopeless when simple love, the transcendent of all bounds, is often shackled with presumption and prejudice." I'll give it back to you, Jen.
Lovely.
Thank you.
So one last thing, what passage would you read for us today?
Okay, so I picked couple pages to read. The part I will be reading from is towards the end of the book. In the story, it is a major turning point in the lives of both Adele and the physical therapist, Sirene. It is a point in time when a big revelation presents itself to both of them, and neither one of them dares to define it. They don't know how to think of it, what to make of it. And they meet in that little kitchen, and they have this scene that I'm gonna read. It is on page, I think I took notes, 285. If you have the book, you can follow with me. Okay. So, she turned around and walked in my direction. She tousled her hair frantically. I must be losing my mind. I feel mangled beyond recognition. I don't know who I am anymore. She sat across from me and started rubbing at her knees. She stood up again and started pacing around the table. I watched her as she circled around me. Well, not that I ever knew who I was. I've always had that problem. I never belonged anywhere. I was never the daughter of my parents. I could never be Camille's wife or Noura's mother. God knows how much I wanted to be normal, just like any family member or acquaintance life threw my way. I always felt torn between two worlds, two lives, and two realities. How I've made it this far beats me. Her arms were moving in all directions. I instantly broke into a sweat. I was still sitting down, feeling more confused than she was, a tingling feeling rising within me. My mind felt like a long, narrow tube of effervescing bubbles, bumping and pushing against each other as each tried to rise to the top, bringing into the open scenes that did not make sense. I felt a painful twist in my stomach as my mind raced through these scenes that slowly became more and more vibrant. I unwrapped the shawl and laid it on the back of the chair. I stood up and walked up to her. My knees were trembling. I wanted to say something, but I knew my voice would fail me. I didn't trust my words, not to make me sound delirious. I took her in my arms and pulled her to me. She buried her face in my chest and cried. I too was crying. We stood in that kitchen in each other's arms for a long time. Her body sank into mine. Only then did I see what could not be seen and feel what could never be explained. I found myself in a world long gone, a world left meaningless to anyone else but me. I lost the concept of time and drifted beyond any tangible fiber. Years of my life coalesced to a dream. I was an immigrant who, years after years of exile, was finally back with his loved ones, picking up from exactly where he had left them. Did he really ever leave? His foreign stay nothing but a vision, a dream, his reflection in the mirror, the only photographic reminder of it. His body aches, wrinkled skin, and gray hair were the only testament to time past. We stood in that kitchen for what seemed like a short time. That time was the only one that existed, that mattered. For 25 years in a foreign land, I searched for something I could not find because I did not know what I was searching for. I came back to my country looking for self-restoration, looking to heal the people around me from that which was ailing me. Helping others and putting a smile on people's faces were the reasons I woke up every morning. The smile, however, was rarely mine. The happiness in my heart was riddled with shrapnel. A total eclipse came to test my resilience. Its evil cast its shadow over my life when, with hatred and envy, he pushed me down a flight of stairs. I was physically disabled. Then my parents pushed me out of his sight and out of my life. I was alienated. Was I supposed to carry on as if nothing had happened? Is an orphaned child in a conquered land supposed to lift his head and face his life and the whole world as if nothing is ailing him? How can he bury what's inside him? Doomed is he for burying inside that which crumbles mountains. Damned is he for letting his resentment surface. In that kitchen, we stood for a brief moment. It was a converging moment. Although this moment seemed to be the most prevalent and tangible moment, to be everything that ever existed, it was unswervingly fleeting, a fraction of an infinitesimal period of time. The only moment where memory meets fantasy, where pain is pain and joy is joy, the only moment of reality. I'll stop right here, Jen. Thank you. Thank you so much for all the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to you, Sarah. I think that's how it goes.
Yes, that's how it goes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Loubna. It was very interesting and my mind was boiling with questions, but I'm going to read a couple of questions or comments we have in the chat down. We have a question from Pauline, who thanks you for the presentation, and she asked which character you feel closer to.
Definitely Adele Jacob, the protagonist. And his reflections actually reflect my thoughts.
Okay.
These 4 chapters I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. Natasha has a question. She says, Mar Elias is a real place, if she's not mistaken, isn't it? Is this book inspired by any real life events or experiences?
Well, Mar Elias is a street that I must have walked thousands of times from school to my home as a child. And I wanted to commemorate that name. So that's why I used it. And yes, like I said in the beginning, all the elements of the story filtered through me. And when they filter through you, no matter how fictional and how unreal they are, they take a portion of you in them. There is something of you in them. From your experiences, the people you meet, there's always ideas in your mind that come together from the experience we live. And yes, definitely, I'm sure I've taken portions here and there from different people around me, and it's a realistic fiction after all.
Somebody else, Kathy Hale, I'm wondering how and at what age you, Loubna, gained your confidence as a female scientist, and was this confidence necessary to your ability to write your novel?
No experience in life is a lost experience. Definitely, everything in me that I used to write the novel had been a culmination of all the experiences I had lived. So yes, science definitely helped me. If you read the book, you'll see several nuances in the book refer to our scientific nuances. And that's why I gave that introduction, because I understand the scientific side, and I am by nature spiritual, if you will. So I kind of put these two together, and I came with the argument that I gave in the beginning of the book. Now, the culmination of my science career, my path in science was not a normal one. I had to come to the US. English was not so strong. I'm French educated. I spoke French and Arabic. I had to get better in English first. So it took me a little while, and then I graduated with biology. I had to raise my children, take some years off, and then go back. So I would think that highest point in my career was in my 30s, early 40s.
Wow, we have a plethora of questions, so be one after the other. We have a lot of questions. One from Dominique, who really enjoyed the discussion. She will definitely get the book. It reminds her of Philip Roth's Nemesis. And she wants to know whether that book by Philip Roth has influenced you in your writing. And then I have 4 more questions after that. Do you want me to tell them to you, all of them?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Annie is asking if you will write any new book, and if so, if it will be a continuation of thought or a completely different fiction. Pauline wants to know if the book will be going to be translated, I suppose, either in French or Arabic. Nabia has a good question also about language. Being multilingual, which language do you feel expresses more accurately your thoughts? Arabic or English? And Eva, just like Annie, wants to know if you're going to planning to write another novel, and if yes, what will it be about?
Okay, can you stop here because I think I'm getting lost.
Okay, so we're going to stop here for. Go ahead, and if you haven't replied, I will.
Okay, so will I be writing another novel? Absolutely. Will it be a continuation? I don't think so. I think there are other fundamental themes that I would love to tackle. I was thinking about mental illness. I think mental illness will be my next endeavor. Which language do I feel more comfortable with? Well, it depends. As of now, I feel more comfortable with English. If you had asked me some few years ago, I'm not going to give a number of years, I would have said Arabic, and at one point it was French, because if you remember in the beginning, I said I used to write short stories and poetry, and that was in French. I loved that language, and it was at one point in my life so easy to express myself using it.
The Philip Roth book, whether the Philip Roth Nemesis has influenced you or not?
There isn't one book in particular that I would say it influenced me. When I read a book, I am in search of themes. And the themes that I used ended up, after I did the study and opened my mind to kind of like shovel through my history of read books. It turned out that most of the books that I really like are the ones that tackled subjects like social inequality, good and evil, the power of hope, the power of intuition, the power of acceptance and tolerance. So I take books and I like books based on their themes. So I take themes. I base myself on theme, not on a particular book. Translation, definitely. That's coming up next. I want to see the book in English, in French, and in Arabic.
I had a question actually myself, if you allow me. I wanted to know, because when you said something very interesting about the past, the present, and the future, and because you're a scientist as well, and I thought, well, this is, and especially when you read that excerpt from your book with this moment, and you said that he had lived 25 years in exile, and this moment, that was it, that was the most important. So that was the present, you know, compared to the past or the future. So I was thinking, has quantum physics influenced your book by any chance?
Definitely. Thank you for that question. I usually always bring up quantum events and the quantum world. It's a wonderful world. It actually revealed itself to us back in the early 1900s, and it came to turn tables, basically, right? We went from a world that is deterministic, that is materialistic, that followed all reductionism and reductionistic laws. All of a sudden, we're faced with a world that is based on probabilities and possibilities. Nothing is determined there. Everything doesn't appear to be normal. Nothing follows any logic. So that came to kind of open our minds to what's going on. Now, although quantum theory has been used, and we use it very well, and all the technology you have today is based on it, we still don't understand it. We do not have a definition for it. We cannot describe it. We can't describe what's going on. It's opening our minds to something new. Okay, so one of them is consciousness. Consciousness is responsible for us to view certain realities of the world. I see certain reality because I am conscious of that certain reality, and I am limited. I don't see all the dimensions that the world could be existing at. So that's why you have interpretations such as multi-universe, they talk about the string theory, and everybody's trying to find out what the real explanation and interpretation of all the happenings at the quantum level are. But consciousness is definitely brought back in the discussion, right? Now people talk about, I am conscious of a certain reality. So that's why it exists. And that consciousness is, if you take the words of Planck, for example, who is the father of quantum theory, he himself said, consciousness is fundamental. It does not reduce itself to the workings of the brain, of the circuitry of the brain. So that takes you already in the scientific world, takes you to a higher level that's touching on or overarching and entering the world of philosophy a little bit. And there's so much been found in science. For example, the radioactivity, the rays that emanate from the atom are the same rays that emanate from the cosmos. And these rays are waves of energy, and waves carry information. So who's to say this information is not going endless in space and time? I mean, you can take it as far as you want.
Yeah. Thank you. I think Natasha had a question about brothers. Natasha, if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Loubna, for your beautiful presentation and for a fascinating book. I read it in like 2 evenings. And the most disturbing character for me was Adele's brother, disturbing in a way that I kept coming back to that and thinking about it. So my question is more of a sentimental matter. So he's revoltingly aggressive and cruel. So I guess my question is, was there a certain reason to make him that way? And if there's a message that the way to fight evil in this life is by not becoming evil ourselves, but on the contrary, remaining merciful and compassionate and good when we face the ugliness in life.
Definitely, and that's the path that Adele chose, to remain good, to remain ethical and moral, and not follow in the path and footsteps of his brother. Thank you, that's a very good question.
I don't have to type the question, maybe it's too late, but I would like to ask you, you have a beautiful presentation, bravo, fantastic. My question has to do with philosophy. You just mentioned philosophy. I am curious about which philosophers, past and present, contemporary, have influenced you, if you are ever, well read in philosophy.
Yeah, the one that I connect most with is definitely Ralph Waldo Emerson. Several of his ideas, if you look at he has a simple book that you can read. It's called The Essays of Emerson's Essays. And in it, you learn about his views on nature, which coincides with mine. Nature is invigorating. Nature stimulates the human intellect. It's a source of spirituality. The truth about who we are could be intuitively drawn from nature. He has his views on people. People are wonderful. People are inherently good, and their potential is limitless. He tells you, you have limitless potential in you. Also the universal mind he talks about, the universal soul, the oversoul, and how our conscious ego, our logic and conscious ego are limited in comparison to the soul. So that's Emerson. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, well, definitely, Loubna, really thank you so much for this event. I'm so glad we were able to connect you in LA and us in DC and hold this event. Thank you again to the Embassy of Lebanon, to Noel for suggesting you, to Mr. Hashem for your introduction, and to Ambassador Isa for attending as well this event. This is wonderful. We love working with the Embassy of Lebanon every year. So we hope we'll be able to do more events with you. And I hope that we will maybe see you in DC. And if you do come in DC, Loubna, please come to the Alliance Française. You will always be welcome. And
thank you.
We'll try to organize something else. Yeah.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, and sign the book.
Yes, because a lot of people will probably get the book in DC, and well, whenever you come, let us know. We'll organize a signing moment just for that.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I have one more thing to add, actually, for those who, you mentioned the library. Is it in DC?
It's a bookstore in DC, Politics and Prose.
Yes, for those who do not live in DC, they can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, and shukran.
Yeah, shukran. Merci beaucoup.
Shukran.
Bye-bye.
Merci.